Okay, we
Oh,
are
we
live,
are
it says.
on it.
So, this, Bonaventure Chapman,
This is Father Joseph Anthony Kress.
welcome to Godsplaining, Livesplaining edition. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly or daily devotion at minutely. Secondly, donation on Patreon. Be sure to like, subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to or consume your podcasts. Father Joseph Anthony, how are you doing?
Not too bad. It's Tuesday night, so we have our weekly Tuesday night dinner as a campus ministry here
Oh,
down at
great.
the University of Virginia. So I had to dip out of that a little early and jump over and get things set up for this episode. But it was chili night, so chili and cornbread. Everybody enjoyed it, and yeah, just in the heat of preparations for Holy Week and Lent and all that kind of fun
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
So it's ramping up in the campus ministry and in the parish and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, it's go time in
Are you
that
doing
sense.
other special days of confession for there? What's
Oh yeah.
UVA's chaplaincy kind of stuff look like for?
So we add additional confession times during the preparatory seasons. So both Advent and Lent get additional confession time. So we added additional hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays throughout the week. And then during Holy Week, we will have 4 confessors available from the hours of 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. So we'll do 6 straight hours with 4 priests available all the way through on the Wednesday of Holy Week. So Spy Wednesday, we will get a lot of confessions in, and then we will add additional confession times on Good Friday. So from noon until 3 p.m. we'll have additional confessors available then. So there's just a lot of opportunities for this graces of the sacrament and the mercies of the Lord.
Yeah, there's the final week as we move. So we're in Passiontide now. We don't usually call it that anymore, but this is Passion Sunday. We put some liturgist person would know this. We put Palm Sunday and Passion Sunday used to be different times. So this 5th week of Lent was Passion Sunday, and that's why the statues and things people might notice in their own parishes are now covered. Or they might be covered. So for Passiontide, and then next Sunday, of course, is Palm Sunday. But we combine those now in the new liturgy. So we combined Passion Sunday and Palm Sunday. So we read the whole thing and you kind of get. It's a bit like Palm Sunday is a bit like the play within a play in Hamlet or Shakespeare, where you kind of see the whole thing once, and then you get the week to kind of play it out in more detail. But it is getting near that time. And if you haven't, I feel like this year Lent really flew by. Maybe that was just me, or maybe that's just the timing of it or something. But if you have not yet got into the Lenten season, or you don't feel like you've been spiritually ready, the nice part is the Holy Week really forces you into it. You can't avoid it to be thinking about these things, especially as you go towards the Triduum, kind of Good Friday. But Holy Thursday is beautiful too. So, yeah.
It's the last few weeks to kind of reset. And you mentioned the covering of the images, whether it's the covering of statues or processional crosses and things like that. It's just an opportunity to kind of allow ourselves to intensify our focus into these final weeks. So it's like we're closing in. It's the final approach. I think of airplanes like circling an airport. It's like, okay, you're making your base leg, now your base turn into the final approach for the landing. So there has to be an intensity of focus in that. I know that airline pilots, they're not allowed to, once they make their descent into the airport, they can't have any distractions. If they hear any kind of frivolous personal conversations or things like that, they can be fined because they need intense focus to be able to land the plane on its marks. So that's kind of what we do when we're kind of clothing or covering the statues is okay, we're coming in for our final approach. So we have to have this intense focus on what's being presented to us. So the focus is going to be on the liturgy. It's going to be on the scriptures. It's going to be on the rituals, the ritual actions throughout the liturgy in this final preparation. So it's kind of fun then to look at the Gospels and what they're presenting in these final 2 weeks to have that intense focus in that way.
Yeah. So we thought we'd talk about in this, we usually do a little bit of back and forth and stuff at the start, a topic, and we kind of getting a little bit into it, but we thought we'd talk about Passiontide or the Passion, and maybe some different aspects of that as we move towards that. So as much for us as for all the listeners and such to move into this week sort of thing. So Passiontide or the Passion, Father Joseph Anthony, what's your what's your go-to? What do you think of? What do
Mhm.
you remember? What strikes you? What's important about this?
Um, I remember as a young child, the most kind of moving liturgy that I could think of, my or most moving kind of religious moments,
Hmm.
um, were the veneration of the cross on Good Friday, and how important
Oh
that
yeah.
was. I remember, like, watching, my mother venerate the cross, and how kind of deeply important that was for her, and as a congregation to walk up and each take our own moment in time to venerate the cross. That just had this like searing moment in
Hmm.
my religious experience, knowing that, like, oh, this is unique. This isn't your every run of the mill stuff. So those were like really important moments, and for many other reasons, the Good Friday liturgy still tends to be some of my favorite liturgies
Hmm.
throughout the liturgical year. But as I was kind of mentioning earlier, like, whether or not you have a good Lent or would categorize this as a good Lent. I was talking to a good friend of mine from St. Louis a few days ago, and she is like, "Yeah, I think I would grade this Lent like pretty much a B minus. Like, it happens." And I was like,
Hmm.
"I'm right there beside you. Like, if it wasn't the best Lent ever, but it was good. But there can always be this time in beginning Passiontide, the final 2 weeks, to say, yep, I'm going to intensify my focus. Whether I can think I held all to my Lenten commitments or not, then these final 2 weeks, I can intensify my focus as a
Hmm.
final preparation for that." So you see this in the church's liturgy, you see this in the church's selections of the liturgical readings, that there is this intensity to enter into this with a new fervor and a new focus. And it's not a way to kind of like, it's not catching up on what we didn't do for the rest of Lent. It's like, nope, wherever you are, let's just take that intense focus for the final 2 weeks in this way. So that's what I appreciate about Passiontide, and that's
Hmm.
where specifically the Passion liturgies in the liturgy of Good Friday have a special place in my heart and my own devotional life.
Yeah, the Good Friday liturgy is beautiful, especially if you have a chance to get to a near religious house, but anywhere with the processional to the cross. Now, it takes time, of course. This is a
Yeah,
long liturgy,
yeah,
and since you've been at Palm Sunday, you've done through the whole thing. You're going to hear again the Passion story, but I think there's a great good in continuing to hear in one sitting or one set the whole Passion narrative. It's when we read things in chunks or get things in chunks, we kind of take control of them. We have the ability to control what we care about, this kind of thing. But with the passion, the long passion narrative, those things, when you're just at the mercy of the readers and the lectors, you're being formed by this story, and you
yeah,
kind of decide whether you're going to reject it or not. Like, I'm going to get into this or not, but it governs what you're going to do in there, which is listening to this whole deal. And it's beautiful because I find myself in both for Palm Sunday and for the Good Friday service, from hearing the Passion. You go through this cycle. I go through it initially getting kind of excited because we're starting this, and then kind of getting wearied because it's like, yeah, I don't know anymore. It's like
yeah,
the one of doing the stations across about like the fifth station or something. I think, gosh, is this really going on for more? But then
yeah.
that's the moment of grace when you say, no, this is the story. Like, this
Hmm.
story
Hmm.
that we're hearing right now is the story of the world that matters, and it's a grace and a gift that I'm able to hear it again, and I'm
Yeah.
able to participate in it in some fashion, as we do with the parts and that kind of thing. So, the Passion, both Palm Sunday and for Good Friday, is a beautiful opportunity to be reminded about the true events and story of the world
Hmm.
that will relativize my own experiences. So
Hmm.
that's that as a liturgical way of existing is helpful during this time,
Hmm.
and it's initially a bit of sometimes it can seem like a bit much, but it's beautiful. We also have this tradition in our religious houses for on Good Friday for our midday meal, which is the
Hmm.
meal the meal of the day. It's fish, of course, and it's in silent, of course,
Hmm.
except there is read the final discourse. So John's
Hmm.
gospel, I think, is so right after the foot washing, basically. So from 14 on through 17 or something. So we get through the
Yeah.
high priestly prayer. That's so it's just Jesus discoursing for 4 chapters of John,
Yeah.
and preparing you for Good Friday, when you pick up John 18. So kind of gets you
Mhm.
from 13 the night before on Thursday, you do 13. And then you're kicking through for the rest of that during the time. So you're again listening to him. And initially you think, oh my gosh, it's like a book. And he's like, oh no, this is not a book being read in this in the refectory. This is our Lord Jesus Christ speaking. And
Mhm.
again, the words, because I don't control how much I listen to them, they're a big set piece.
Mhm.
They're the ones that dictate to me again a new story that I have to enter and come under, as opposed to picking and organizing the different parts of it myself to say what I want to say.
Yeah. I think your presentation of like how do we engage with these liturgical, or I mean these scriptural selections in the liturgy, is so beautiful and extremely important, because what I found, and I slip into this all the time as well, like my natural disposition to these types of moments is the disposition of entertainment. And like those readings are
Hmm.
long and they're drawn out,
Yeah.
and sometimes you have a really monotone kind of flat lector who is just like, oh bro, there's like, you're putting me to sleep here. And I think we can slip into that mentality of entertainment and like, this is long, this is boring, this is flat, this is not entertaining, and then your mind drifts and you're off and away. But if we start to see it as like, actually, this is, and you kind of use that phrase, you're like, this is the story of the world. This is the story of my salvation. This is, and I get the grace to hear this anew into this present day life. I get the grace to hear my saving mysteries, that like all of this can be very exciting and can draw you into a deeper engagement at that moment, as well as attentiveness. So I think that's really important to maybe help our listeners, like, okay, if you're going to go and stand there through the passion narrative this upcoming Sunday, it's going to be long and it's going to be weird and it's not entertaining, because what? It's not meant to be entertaining. Like, this is the proclamation of our salvation, and we get to participate and we get the grace to hear it again, and praise Jesus for that. And
Yeah.
then you kind of mentioned the Sermon Domini in our refectories. We do
Hmm.
it slightly different down here, just because the
Okay.
dynamics and
Sure.
whatnot here.
Yep.
We have the adoration, the Blessed Sacrament on Holy Thursday. So after the liturgy on Holy Thursday, we adore the Blessed Sacrament until midnight.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we have a courtyard that's part of our parish center, and we actually do it outside. And it's one of my favorite things that we do, is that we have a small tent above the tabernacle, and if we are entering into kind of the garden with the Lord, and you can hear the wind rushing, you can hear some of the birds and stuff, and it really kind of resets the scene of staying with the Lord as he goes into the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, and you kind of feel that, and you're underneath the stars and all those moments. And from 11 p.m. is when we begin the Sermon Domini. And so it's like the
Hmm.
final thing we do.
Oh,
We
nice.
read that
Yeah.
the night before. So that's a really special moment. It's one of my favorite moments that
Hmm.
we have here as part of our campus ministry, is to pray with the Lord under the stars, but then to hear him give this final discourse the night before he was killed. So yeah, those are just my little two thoughts in that sense. But I'm
Yeah.
excited for Holy Week because those
Well,
are
that's
some of
great.
my favorite moments.
They are. They're really. They're really great, and each parish has its own coloring to it, and
Right.
there's little traditions around it. But of course, on Friday, Stations of the Cross is a traditional thing to do. So, the Good Friday is a really beautiful time of just emptiness and the desolation, preparing for Easter Sunday and the
Mhm.
Easter Vigil. If you have not been to an Easter Vigil in your life, oftentimes it's just not possible to get to them time wise, your families, this sort of thing. But but if you do
Excuse
have
me.
a chance, it'd be nice. You ought to go to one at some point just to see it. I know it's super hard to get to those Easter vigils sometimes, but they are beautiful, especially when people receive it in the church. And oftentimes in parishes, I think they do them earlier than like midnight or those kind of things. But it is
Ours
that's
ours
another
starts
that's
at
another long
8
one.
PM
Okay,
this year.
yeah, yeah,
8
and
PM
that's
is our kickoff.
and that's
So
another long one because you have tons of readings
7
in there.
Old Testament
7
readings.
readings if you're doing all of them, which is great. And again, the mentality of not entertainment, but having told to us again the story. We're so
Mhm.
used to finding stories ourselves and reading stories and getting things on our own and looking up online, Wikipedia and Google and whatever. But the traditional thing is if you want to know something, you have to find someone who knew it and have it told to you.
Ooh, yeah.
And so this is what the so in this we again put ourselves at the feet of those who know That is
Mhm.
that is to say the Holy Spirit through the scriptures, and we are therefore subservient to the word and listening to the word and conforming our lives to the word in that. So again,
Mhm.
it has the same kind of, if you treat it as entertainment, you think, I know the story. But if you say, I need to hear these words again, they need to touch me, each one of these words, then it's easier to get into. Okay, but let's get into some
Uh,
questions. We have questions from Patreon supporters, which we appreciate, of course. Thank you for your donations. We'll get to those and some new comments from people. And anyone's, if for those who are here, please feel free to jump in, this sort of thing. But let's start off with the first one here. We have one of our Patreon questions. Love your podcast. Great. Do you have any writings, books, or meditations in the Passion that you would recommend? Father Joseph Anthony, what do you, so books, reading
hmm.
material for Passiontide or this coming week? What, any recommendations, scripture
Yeah.
or otherwise?
Always go to scripture, right? I mean, read the passion accounts in the scriptures. So you will hear the passion account according to Matthew this year on Palm Sunday, and then you'll hear the passion account according to John on Good Friday. So you always hear John on Good Friday, no matter what year it is. But Palm Sunday rotates. So just so that you know, Matthew and John is this year. So if you wanted to maybe read the others, that might help, or just dive into those two for the year. I would highly recommend that. The other thing that I would say is I've always been a fan of Fulton J. Sheen's Life of Christ.
Mm.
And so going to the chapters on his passion is very helpful. For me, they're very vivid and they help me to enter into those moments well. And then the last thing I would say is Benedict XVI's book, Jesus of Nazareth, on the kind of passion narratives. So it's
Second
the
volume.
second
Yep.
one he published, and I think it's
Yeah.
the third volume in the set, but it's like the
Yep.
second one that he published. It's the thickest one. It's the purple cover if you are buying it from Ignatius Press, but that's a fantastic book that really helps to walk you through all that led up to the crucifixion and the dynamics and things within the mix of it. So I would say those would be my recommendations.
That's great. I like the penitential Psalms. So you can look these up, just type in 7 penitential Psalms, and praying those that Holy Week, one a day, cycle through them is helpful that just as a Lenten practice. So, but I recommend those things. Yeah. Okay. Here's a little bit long one here. Hello, fathers. Thank you so much for your marvelous podcast. It enriches me greatly, and I catch all your episodes. Great. Thank you. Last week, I went to my Lenten confession with what I considered to be venial sins, sounding impatient, anger, being jealous, envious of the competition. Okay, the priest cut me short and said just to read through the short list. Then when I finished, he said he didn't ever want me to return to confession with these types of sins or behaviors again, that I was not committing mortal sin and I was being too scrupulous. Okay. He also said that I might have a mild form of OCD. Fine. The real kicker is said stop reading right-wing Catholics who define confession. Interesting. He was harsh and said because of his experience in confession, it was best to be harsh with folks like who present sins such as mine. His implication was confessions is for mortal sin, period. Although I know confession should not be for all less than stellar actions or behaviors, is the sacrament of confession reserved for mortal sins only? Why or why not? Thanks for your guidance. Okay, let me just start and say, I'm sorry that this confessional experience was a tough one. I think, some people have bad confession experience and just never come back, or they judge it by one thing. Each priest is different. Who knows what this guy's story is, this sort of thing. Also during Lent, maybe just they're exhausted. They're doing a lot of confessions. This could be. So I'm not trying to say to let him off the hook there, but he sounds, if and we only have your side of it because otherwise I'd be breaking the seal. So he sounds a little bit harsh. The answer to your question, the important part is, though, is confession only for mortal sins? No, it's not. It is the mortal. It's designed for mortals, instituted for mortal sins, of course.
Yep.
And venial sins can be forgiven in all sorts of ways. I think people forget that actually at the start of the Mass, the venial sins when presented in Mass, you have Confiteor at the start. That's why it's good to get to Mass and be quiet early and kind of reflect on and ask for forgiveness. So when we do the confession at the start, the Confiteor, we're dispose ourselves to receive grace and be forgiven our venial sins. But the confessional is also a fine place for this because it's about developing developing virtues. And Dominicans are big on the virtue of penance, the act, the habit of our souls that allow us to ask for forgiveness, to apologize in this. And confession is a way that allows you to develop that habit, as habits are developed through actions, um, and therefore makes it easier to do that in other circumstances. So the Dominicans have generally been big fans of what even might be called devotional confessions, confessions that don't involve any particular mortal sin, but sometimes not even venial sin, but an ask of forgiveness, and asking for forgiveness and disposition of heart to receive graces. Needs to be something there, otherwise it's not confession. But it doesn't needn't be mortal sin, even though that is what it's primarily designed for. I don't know what else to say about that. You sound like you're a well catechized person, so you understand that it's not just reserved for that, and who knows what that man meant, and maybe just ought not to go in. But that's my kind of off the cuff reflections, Father Joseph Anthony.
Yeah, I think that you're making the proper and appropriate distinction there, that it is primarily instituted for the remission of mortal sins, but not exclusively, right? So it's primarily instituted for that, but one can, include venial sins in a confession, or if the confession only includes venial sins, then we would refer to it as a devotional confession, which of itself disposes one to grace and forgiveness and a deeper union with God. So like there's so much that's important to that. I think what I've also found too, hearing confessions, is the frequency is also very important. And, so if somebody is saying like, oh, it's been 24 hours and only brings venial sins, and you might be one like, okay, let's actually start to, move this out. But like if it's once a month, once to 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks is, I think, a healthy frequency for frequent confessions. If there are no mortal sins, that's a beautiful, like actually beautiful part of a devotional life and a virtuous life, like you were saying, that cultivating this virtue of penance and things like that. So yeah, I think we have to be able to recognize that it's primarily for mortal sins, not exclusively. That we can bring our venial sins into the confessional with confidence in the Lord's mercy in that, and not afraid, not turning venial sins into mortal sins in anything. The other thing that I think about now that we're talking this whole venial mortal back and forth, I found a lot of times that people confuse mortality with deliberateness. Being like, "Oh, I knew that was wrong and I did it anyway, so now it's mortal." It's like, no, 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 that's a different category. Like, there is such a category as deliberate venial sins that we should bring to the confessional and ask the Lord's mercy, but that's different. Just because there's deliberateness doesn't automatically elevate it to mortal sin in that way. Yeah, I'm spiraling and I'm going on tangents, so I'm gonna
That's
shut
fine.
up.
No, it's good to. It's just in case of hearers, and you're right about that. Mortal sin is, so the general traditional distinction: three conditions. Has to be grave matter. It has to be full consent of the will and knowledge. Now, it doesn't mean you need to know that it's a mortal sin. But you need to know that you're doing it, and you need to choose to do it, as you mentioned, Father Joseph Anthony. And it has to be grave matter, it has to be serious matter. So I usually use like picking up a paper clip or taking a paper clip from in front of someone. No matter how malicious you were about it, it's just not enough matter for that sin, unless the paper clip is the thing that actually is a life-saving tool that a surgeon uses. Blah blah blah. But it has to be grave matter with full knowledge and consent of the will. Just because you've deliberately, as you say, done something that you know, doesn't mean it's a mortal sin. It just means it's human action. And not all human actions are mortal sins, thankfully. Okay, let's do this one. I was online last night to purchase a set of rosary beads. Brilliant. I had no idea there was so much variety and choice. Of course. As a person who has to research every purchase I make to a PhD level, it's a bit paralyzing. Okay, we're here to help. What kind of rosaries do you prefer? Colors. Ooh, someone's from Canada with a U there. Materials, metals, etc. Thanks, everything. Love the podcast. Sunday lectures are excellent. Very good. Father Joseph Anthony, any rosary advice you could say?
Oh, yeah. Let's go with this. I think about who you're getting the rosary for, how they're going to use it. Is this a rosary that they're going to keep in their kind of like prayer space or oratory or their chapel that is, in that place? Is it something that is actually going to be a little decorative that helps to remind them of a certain thing or a certain person? Is this an everyday carry rosary, right? Is this going to be in your pocket? Is it going to get beat up? Is it going to be in a bag? So I think those types of things start to gauge whether or not, like, what materials are used. For rosaries that take a little more of a beating, I would stay away from like linked rosaries and get a cord rosary that has beads on top of it. The cord rosaries still tend to like not break as easy. If it's something that you're carrying on a regular basis, it might clip on a doorknob or something like that. And it's okay to have a little more kind of precious rosaries, things that are made of
Mhm.
nicer materials or gems or things like that. Um, yeah, I think making sure that the rosary is for the individual who's going to use it.
Mhm.
Um, there are some very heavy duty kind of masculine rosaries that are made of like parachute cord and like, very heavy weighted beads and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Our college guys love those types of rosaries. They want a rosary with a little more heft to it. Versus,
Yeah.
a little more feminine rosary or something like that. And then thinking about how it's going to be used can dictate what materials are made.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's a good point to make about the use of it. So I have like a daily rosary. I mean, we have our big rosaries we wear on our side, so we use
Mhm.
those guys, canons, I should say, and then we have the little guys. So I always carry one of those little ones. So this little just a rope one,
Yeah.
and it's small and it folds up right in your pocket, so you can carry this with you at all times. It doesn't make a lot of noise, this sort of thing, so I
Mhm.
can pray in groups and not worry about banging on things. So I think those are. It's good to have like an all-purpose small rosary, quarter rosary kind
Mhm.
of thing. And then for other things, though, as you mentioned, for might be in the chapel and oratory or things you take in church or you keep in a purse or something, just whatever suits your fancy. I also like heavy, more like stone beads. I suppose I always like that. You're gonna be using the beads and touching them. It's a tactile experience, so it's good to pick something you like. Plastic
Mhm.
is okay, but yeah, try it out. You should say, because it's going to be something that is going to become a sacramental. You're going to bless it, have it blessed, I should say. So it's going to be something around a bit. So you want something good. It's something nice. Okay. So colors, that's up to you. I'm definitely not going to dictate on colors, considering I can't see any of them.
I was
All
gonna say
right.
you are not the person to talk to about what's the best color rosary.
Here we go.
That's
Thank
great.
you, fathers, for your podcast. Great. I have a sort of weird question regarding eternity. Excellent.
Hmm.
I know some people who find that concept terrifying, overwhelming. I know there's no way for someone to understand the concept, but is there any way to find solace or even a want in living forever? It's like explaining the technology of a phone to an ant, meaning our will, ideas of heaven, hell, etc. Okay, cool. This, I'll start with this one. Let's see
I
if
was gonna
Jeff's
say
family.
this. You lead off on this.
Well, this is cool. I think about this a lot too.
You do.
So, because eternity just doesn't sound that attractive in some ways,
No.
right? I mean, being with Jesus sounds very attractive. Being
Mhm.
in heaven sounds very attractive, right? Living forever initially sounds very attractive, but then when you start to kind of piece it out, forever, what are we gonna do? Like that's I mean, a long time. I mean, it's more than 20 years. It's a lot of years. It's
It's a
multiple
lot of years.
20s. It might be an infinite number of years. That's just a long time. So, and then you can start to, yes, I think rightfully so, you can start to get kind of freaked out. Now, here's why I think why this happens. This is more modern conception, by the way. I don't think medievals worried about this. But I've been thinking about, so there's like a meta reflection, why this freaks some people out. One, because I think they think of heaven as like themselves being doing something in a room. Like it's just I've got to do something forever, right? But heaven ideally is with another person, at least one, uh, but kind of three, and then maybe more. So it's interaction with God and with the saints, and I think in our experience we know that when we're interacting with people, having a conversation or something, time slips away,
Yeah.
phenomenologically. Like you
Yep.
don't keep track
Yep.
of time. Sometimes oh my gosh, I can't believe we talked for an hour and a half. I think everyone's had this experience or something, right?
Yeah.
So, and that might have been a long time. Sometimes like 2 hours. You don't even think about it. All right. Because it's the activity of the person. We tend to think of time as this like as a clock just kind of ticking on and we're just doing things with it. But time isn't like that. So when you're with another person, time has this different feel. So we don't think about the clock ticking. We only do that when we're by ourselves, basically, and we're no one else to relate to. And I think people think, but when they think about heaven, they don't think of the conception of it being relational. When it'll have that experience of, well, tons of time passed, but you didn't even notice. So now extend that out, given the fact that it's with God and this sort of thing. I think that's one thing that helps with that. And the other, of course, is that time is based upon the changing of things, the degrading of things, and all of this, and space, time, curvature, whatever. Guess what's going away? All of that. So time and eternity are in itself kind of tricky to think about it, and that's what you mentioned with this, having a hard time making sense of eternal time. Is it's fair. Don't know. Not exact. It's not something you don't need to have it all figured out, and it won't make perfect sense. And to say it'll be a long time in eternity is doesn't make. It's like a chunk of an infinite. Let's not talk about cardinal numbers and infinite sets and all this kind of stuff, and Kantian logic and Kantian mathematics. But I think it's helpful to think just in terms of our experiences of when time speeds up and slows down, and we don't count it in those kind of as a boring way. But I think a lot of that's because of either something really joyful, or most of the time in our relationships when we're relating to someone. So I think the best way is to help someone think about, even if it's yourself, the times when you didn't notice time passing because you were in a relationship, and just magnify that. Yeah.
I have nothing else to say on that. I love that image of losing track of time with somebody that you love, because
that's great.
We've all had that. That's awesome.
I think so. I hope if you haven't had that,
you
need to do it. All right. Well, this is for you, Father Joseph Anthony. Good evening, fathers. I'm reading now the life of Mary as seen by the mystics. Great, based on the revelation of Venerable Anne Catherine Emmerich, Venerable Mary of Ardagh, and Saint Bridget of Swindon, and Saint Elizabeth of Schnau. I enjoy the words of the Blessed Virgin Mary in italics in the book. Ooh, that's helpful. It should be in blue. Jesus' words are in red in some Bibles.
That's a great idea.
However, I like the Marian in blue. Yeah, maybe there's a Catholic Bible that has that. However, the rest of the narrative, it's just short. It's only a few words. Narrative emphasizes the divine nature of Jesus. E.g., the author portrays Mary as serving him his meals on her knees, and also the supernatural in Mary. Angels helping her cleaning. Cool. On the one hand, it made me think of the complexities of the incarnation. That is good. On the other hand, I kind of envisioned a Holy Family that was more approachable, more relatable on the human natures. I'm curious about your own views on the Holy Family. Also, any advice on how to take books like these? To be fair, in the foreword, it says the book should not be read as a fifth gospel, but a religious novel. But how should I read religious novels like this? Thank you. Excellent. Father Joseph Anthony, what do you think about, so first, this kind of Holy Family business and like peeling back the curtain and that. And secondly, what you do with these kind of religious revelation books like this? How do you treat them?
Yeah, I mean, I think revelations and those types of things, like, they have to be taken with a certain amount of like aspects of devotion. None of this is like the what is it? Like the foreword said, like, this isn't another fifth gospel, right? This is not inspired. This is a certain private revelation that was given to a certain individual for their own faith and their own devotion, and it may assist others as well. It may not. And that's where like this kind of aspect of to put underneath the category of devotion, like if this helps you and helps you to grow closer to our Lord and deepen your faith and your union with him, praise Jesus. But it's not something that I think I'd rather buy 1,000 copies of the Gospels and put it in people's hands than devotional books like this. So my own reading of the Holy Family, my own devotion to the Holy Family, I think may fall along those lines of like kind of the approachable side of things. Like I've meditated many times about the inner workings of the Holy Family, with Saint Joseph being the only person that has experienced original sin in that dynamic, and the kind of hilarity for that. But it's also, there was a lot about the Holy Family that we see in the Gospels that makes them ordinary. And the fact that, like, this was an ordinary carpenter who had an ordinary wife and cared for an ordinary son, and it didn't raise alarm bells. And for many senses, it was that hiddenness, that ordinariness that was part of the sanctification of the world. So yeah, I think if we're just going to talk about our own kind of personal readings of the Holy Family and devotional, I personally fall along those lines of the approachable side. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that Mary was aware, or I should say she was not unaware of the divinity of her son. It was not the "Mary, Did You Know"
Yes,
Christmas song. That is
that's fair.
trash.
That's fair. Yep.
She was fully
Yeah, yeah.
aware. How she expressed that devotion to her son and understanding the totality of who he is, I have no idea, and I'm sure
Yeah.
it was very tender, and I'm sure it was beautiful and intimate, just like the rest of the Holy Family. There is an artist from Australia, and I got 3 of her prints, and we hung them up in our campus ministry center of the Holy Family. And it's Joseph with the child Jesus, and he's kissing the child's forehead. It's Mary with the child Jesus, and she's holding him, and they're laughing and things. And then there's the third print, which is the Holy Family, and Joseph's holding the child Jesus, and he also has his arm wrapped around Mary, and he's kissing her forehead. And I think that's like that ordinary family
Yeah.
experience. It's like
All right.
we've seen those families, husband and wife,
Yeah.
as they hold their child, embrace. And I think that is also, for me, that's really beautiful, and I love those types of images, to see the Holy Family interact with each other in that way. It's
Yeah.
just an insight to my own prayer life and personal devotions.
Yeah.
It's not doctrine in any sense, and I'm going to
No,
leave
it
it
seems
there.
super creepy. I would definitely not do that kind of image. But
Exactly.
but I think but the important part is it's like to if it helps you. I think with these things, they're
Yeah.
not sacred scriptures. If it helps you, you can accept it. If it doesn't help you, don't accept it. Nope, not a chance. Got to accept it. But with Revelation stuff, I'm a big Faustina fan, obviously, and Faustina's Revelations means a lot to me. But they're not church gospel, and so even though I think they're true, they are not given universally to everyone. Therefore, so it's received according to the mode of the receiver, which is how it affects you. And they always have to check these things. So if it helps, great. If it's not, put it away. It's for someone else. That's why I always think about this. The Lord leaves plenty of messages for different people throughout time. And sometimes some people pick them up, sometimes people don't. That's great. Okay.
And I would say, if there's something that helps you like that and you want to share it with somebody, like, always doing that. Like, I found this very helpful for my faith, and I would like to share it with you. Instead of, sometimes I've seen people pick up devotions and like, you got to read this. This is everything. It's like, oh, we'll pump the brakes here. Like,
Yes.
if it's helpful for you, say that this was beautiful. I found this interesting and helpful. I would like to share that because I found it so helpful.
That's great. Okay, let's do some quick ones here. Hello, fathers. Is it
Yes.
permitted to receive Holy Communion at the Easter Vigil and at the Easter Sunday Mass? It is indeed, because you're allowed to receive communion twice in one day, maximum, as long as the second one is a Mass. This one fits the exact circumstances for that. There's other circumstances that are, but you are allowed to do both these things, of course, especially since the second one is a Mass. Okay, let's do. This is going to people live here. Hello, a certain green vegetable says hello. Well, hello to you. Okay. Teresa Paula says, can a Catholic priest who may not be in a clerical garb deliver a sermon in a non-Catholic Christian wedding ceremony? I think he can. I'm sure it's happened. Ought he do it? Nah, I don't think so. He's high. Why would he not be wearing? I mean,
I don't know.
Is it conceivable there's a circumstance where this would be the right thing to do? Maybe. But in general, why wouldn't he be? Yeah, what's he presiding over? The specifics might be important here, but I would say in general, no. But specifics could be important. Okay. Teresa P. Another Teresa with dogs. Good evening, fathers. This came up in my Bible study. Since we believe that the wafer is transubstantiated, into the actual body of Christ. Well, a sacramental body, yeah. Why is a gluten-free wafer okay or acceptable? Awesome. It's not. Father Joseph Anthony, why is a gluten-free wafer not acceptable?
Well, it's not acceptable because it doesn't have the proper matter. It doesn't have any gluten, so it's not wheat. You have to have wheat. So there's a little bit of misconception here. Like, so much of our culture and our world is like GF friendly. It's gluten-free friendly. You see the little icons on menus of every time you go out to a restaurant and things. If that, churches, and we use special hosts for those that have a gluten sensitivity. It's a low gluten host. So there's a certain percentage. There actually is gluten. It is wheat. It is bread. In that sense, like, there is a reduced number of gluten, but it cannot be gluten-free.
Yep, that's right. And I remember I was at a place where they said, "Oh, we've got some gluten-free hosts here for you to consecrate." And I said, "I can't. That's those are for the Protestant." And it's just one of those things that some Protestant churches, they don't care about this, but for the Catholics it has to be low gluten. So that's very important. Low gluten is acceptable because it is still bread-ish.
Yeah.
Not that any of those wafers really look like bread anyway, but it has gluten, it has the matter in it. Okay.
Yeah, it's proper matter.
Question, fathers, can a Dominican friar hunt for sport? Well, yeah, I guess. He probably didn't used to be able to, I suspect, because we still not really eat meat. But I,
True.
yeah, I mean, can a Dominican friar hunt? Yeah, I think you probably can.
Hmm.
Probably can.
I know a few that do. So
Yeah, it's fine.
mhm.
And I mean, I was walking outside and I saw an ant, so I killed that. That's hunting, right?
I
I'm not
guess
going to eat it.
for sport.
Okay. Barry Muntz went for sport. Ooh. Question, fathers, what are your thoughts on hair implants or transplants? Father Joseph Anthony, what do you think about these things? What's going on here?
Hot
It's
takes.
like
Here we go. I
is
mean,
this like should people get hair implants? Is that what the
like
question's
hair
about?
plugs and implants and things like that. All right, so my hot
Like you want
take
to
is
fix
this.
this kind of like this kind of business
Yeah, the
here?
little
Like
widow's
yeah,
peak. If
the
you get that
widow's peak
horse show
action.
thing. Mhm.
Okay, yeah, that's what we're going for.
I think you like there are certain signs of aging, right? The graying of hair, which I know far too well. The hair loss in that sense. When we start to really kind of counteract that in ways that we're denying our kind of proper state of life and the progression of life that is taking
Mhm.
place by implanting hair plugs or repeatedly dyeing our hair and things like that. So I think there's a certain aspect to the natural progression of our life and the aging that we take that is appropriate to embrace, and it may not be
Mm,
attractive and it may not be our desired, and unfortunately our body kind of wears and fails us sometimes in ways that we don't like or that we don't expect, and we have to be able to embrace that. That's a certain type of embrace of our human state of life and the embrace of our human frailty. So I would advise against it and just say, like, generally,
mm,
like, there's
mhm,
sometimes our bodies does do things, and there's a certain level of frailty, whether it's a hair thinning or the graying of our hair, that actually we need to be able to embrace,
mm.
and it's a certain embrace of our life and the realities that present to us. So generally, I don't advise people to get hair plugs.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know how much it costs, but it might be a high expenditure for something that could
I don't
be
know. Yeah.
would may call a vanity project. No, of course, people do wear makeup and people do dye their hair, and so
Mhm.
there's a spectrum here, I suppose. But I think it's the right question is to involve is what are you afraid of? What are you doing? And what's going on there? But that's yeah okay.
Yeah.
Um, oh, sorry. Whoops. Yeah, we're doing Ingrid right now. Ingrid, hello, dear
Ingrid,
fathers. Looking forward to seeing you both in June. We are looking to see forward to seeing you. Ingrid's one of
welcome back,
our big yeah frequent
retreaters.
guests, you could say, retreaters, delightful, and from a Dominican parish too. My parents and I were discussing the gospel from this past Sunday, and we were a little hung up on the statement Jesus was perturbed. Could you
Mm,
elaborate a little on what it was he may have been perturbed about in that scenario? Thank you. For those, remember, this is the gospel. This is the Jesus weeps gospels. This is John 11,
raising of
resurrection,
Lazarus.
resurrection of
Mhm.
Lazarus. And it has the shortest 11 John 11:35 is the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. And right before he weeps, they say Mary has come out at this point, I think it is,
Yeah.
and says if you were here, our brother would have died. And he says and people are there, and it says Jesus was perturbed. Perturbed is the English translation of it. Um, and then he says, "Show me where they've laid him," and then he goes and he weeps. I think perturbed has this weird connotation of like puzzled, interested. I don't have the Greek on hand with me.
Mm-mm.
But I was thinking the same thing, Ingrid, as I was listening to this, and I thought, reminding myself, this is troubled. Like the water's kind of troubled a bit, I think, is my reading of it, is that
Mm,
he there. I mean, set yourself in this situation. He's surrounded by these people, the people he loves. He has a human nature, not only a divine nature. He's not just like hanging out a human body. And all those around him are weeping and crying out to him, and are saddened, and he experiences this, right? I mean, he knows, of course, what he is and who he is, and he knows all things, but he also feels, he does experience things. So I think of it as like a troubled, his spirit was troubled. Like he can, in the agony in the garden, he is, you could say, perturbed. He's troubled there as well. And that's not a problem. In fact, it's deeply important that he is able to do that. Otherwise, he's just some sort of weird sky god. So I took
mhm.
perturbed as being troubled in spirit, is how I got it. Father Joseph Anthony, any comment on that?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly,
What the Greek word is?
the no, I don't know the Greek off the top of my head. The NABRE is what we heard in the
Mm-hmm.
liturgy, and it says perturbed.
Yeah.
I looked at the RSV
Okay.
in prepping the homily, and the RSV said troubled. So I
Troubled
remember
there
like
it
when I
is.
picked, yeah.
Yep.
So like there's a little bit of a discrepancy in how that word gets translated.
Yep.
So I think, yeah, perturbed, the way that I read perturbed is kind of like annoyed and like kind of like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah. Used or something
but
like what's yeah. Yeah.
but
But
I think,
troubled. Right.
troubled is like he was deeply moved and troubled at watching the crowd follow Mary because they thought she was going to the tomb and that there's this large crowd comforting her. She's leading the charge, and he was deeply moved and troubled by seeing all of this. And so I that's the way I would read that, is kind of like the fact that the Lord was deeply moved by the scene in front of him. And like you said, kind of like when the waters get perturbed or the waters
Yep.
get stirred up and troubled, that's what's happening in him at
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah, we all know we have this experience, right? We are.
Mhm.
If anyone has not, if you haven't had this experience in life, you haven't lived long enough yet. But maybe there could be something like this. But there are situations where things are so chaotic or sad that you
Mhm.
feel almost taken over. It's not like you've lost control of your body, but you feel like everything in you is kind of moving. As a deeply human
Mm.
experience, and Jesus has those experiences, of course. Okay, Peter R. Can a Catholic work in the defense industry, such as a company like Lockheed Martin? Would this be a formal cooperation with evil if such
Mm.
companies contribute to unjust wars and attacks? Thanks, fathers. That's a great question, Peter. Good distinction there. Formal and material cooperation.
Mhm.
When you cooperate with evil, for instance, formal is that you, in a sense, take on the end, the desire of that thing that you cooperate with. Material is you just happen to kind of be involved in a sense. So, like, you could formally cooperate with abortion by giving money to a Planned Parenthood, for instance, like for a place that procures abortions. It's hard to
That'd be
imagine you giving money to Planned Parenthood and not doing that. But for instance, if you buy coffee at Starbucks, they do give some money, or at least some of the employees do give some of their money from their paycheck to Planned Parenthood. So by buying coffee, you are cooperating with abortion in some really,
really
but it's
remote,
but it's
like,
material, because I don't
material.
go to Starbucks and say, "Hey, I'd like to support abortion." They say, "Would you like cream with that?" And I say, "Sure, coffee and cream would be great with that." Right? It's you're not going to buy. So now some places they get close, but when they're near each other, there's some vagueness here. But the material cooperation is it's not the intention of this company
Mhm.
to do this, whereas formal is you actually intend this. Defense contractors and defense companies are aimed at defending and killing. There's nothing wrong with that particularly. And so they're really instruments of the state, you could say.
Mhm.
So I think it's not so much that they are, even though they're formally intended to be involved in war, since war itself is not evil, or at least it does
Yeah.
not in all cases. Then they are not formally set up for evil in a way that, like, an abortion clinic is formally set up to kill innocent life. A defense, Lockheed Martin, is not formally set up for this. It's formally set up to defend. It might do that, just like all sorts of things. But I think it's still material cooperation because of the circumstances involved. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my just a moral work on that.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that, like, okay, defense contractor, those that work in the defense industry in some sense, like, yeah, they're actually working in defense, and there's a certain right to defend one's homeland and those types of things. And
Yeah,
sometimes you have to have weapons to defend yourself and things like that. Now others may then take those same weapons and now go on the aggression of it, and those are different things, and how those things get used is a difference. The other thing that I would say too is, I know some engineers that work in the defense industry, and they work for these said companies, and they're like, yeah, they're brilliant engineers, and they work on rockets and all these things, and they say, actually, what we're doing is actually making these munitions a little safer so that they can target the intended enemy and not have more of a collateral damage that then has a greater possibility of getting bystanders and citizens caught up in it, so that they can be a little more exact and a little more precise in
yeah.
those sense. So like there's a different aspect of it too, is actually there's the precision element of it that takes really smart people to help in that, so that those that are innocent don't get caught up in the mix or those types
This
of
is a
things.
good.
So
This is a good. This is a good general point that Father Joseph Anthony's making. That if it's not, if your company is not, or your job is not involved in formal cooperation, it might be good that Christians and Catholics are there, because that would make it.
Mhm.
They'll make it better. So that's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Bob and Melissa Spinelli, we love you,
I
Friars.
think
Can't wait to
other
be with you on the
retreaters,
retreat on
right?
this
Yep.
Sunday. Yep, exactly. This summer. That's great. We're looking forward to it. Versa Lealta, Eastern Church traditions are amazing, especially those of Good Friday. Check that out. Eastern churches have
Love those.
beautiful liturgy too. We're all pumped about that. We love the Friars. We pray for you daily. We've been so blessed by ministry. That's great. Oh man, you guys are just too generous. That's great. Emily Matenzo, fathers. May
Emily
God bless
M.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Emily M. May God bless you. Today I read about St. Philip Neri. Oh, yeah. He used to say, the soul that seeks recreation out of the Creator and consolation out of Christ will never find them. True? The soul that seeks recreation outside of the Creator and consolation. I think maybe out of. Does that mean outside of? So like seeks recreation outside of the Creator and consolation outside of Christ will never find them. That might be true. Definitely recreation outside the Creator and consolation outside of Christ in some fashion. Yeah, that might be true. But I think that's so that out. I think must mean outside of. Okay, Paola, thanks for answering my question. We try. We really do.
I think so. Yeah.
To back up Father Bonaventure, when our 9-year-old had issues with eternity, my husband pulled out relativity. Exactly. General relativity is super important in this. Well, special relativity because of how light dilation goes. And here it is. As you approach the speed of light, time appears to slow down. Not only appears to slow down, here's the crazy part, does slow down. Isn't that nuts? Okay. Am I missing something in the story, or is Elizabeth's immediate conclusion upon seeing Our Lady that she was carrying a child conceived by the Holy Ghost? Yeah, this is the visitation event.
Oh, okay.
That's a fun one. I don't know what to say about that, really. So she says, she sings, Elizabeth sings her thing. She's got something because John the Baptist leaps in her womb and all this kind of thing. Yeah, she's got some. But I think there's a difference between like knowing. You can have incoherent kind of knowledge, and you can have like perfect knowledge. And I think this is part of course, the human experience is to come to know more fully. God, of course, Jesus Christ knows everything directly this way. But humans, we come to it. So when someone's approaching a distance, you see like, it's a thing out there.
Yeah.
It's a man. It's Peter. Right. You kind of, you progressively know more. You can say like, oh, you didn't know Peter was coming. Like, no, I knew Peter was coming. I saw him. You didn't see him. You saw a thing. No, I saw him. I just didn't know it was him. So I think in the same way with the revelation of Christ, especially to the family members here, you have this sense of there's something here that's super important. I mean, that's when I try to get back to this Elizabeth model. There's something in this woman's womb, my cousin, who is the kind of, we've been told these stories, blah, blah, blah. But second person of the Trinity, maybe not right away. That's my kind of suspicion. I think it's like a phenomenological development for them. Okay. I want to go back to a Patreon thing that I was saving.
Let's go.
It says, hello, I have been thinking, this is why I was saving it to the end.
Yeah,
I think about the ray of divine mercy given to St. Faustina, which God told her that he would pray with. So this is the image. I wanted to check with you what I think God might be trying to communicate about the ray in addition to and in keeping with the interpretation of the ray, as already told Faustina. Sure thing. Okay, so he told her about it. St. Faustina says the blood is the blood of Christ's passion. Exactly. The water is from, this is good ties inclusio from our talk, to our waters from baptism. Perhaps the blood represents the piercing of his body caused by the upward dialectic, our objections. Oh, this is interesting. Requests and prayers from going to and through Christ, and the water from which we are spiritually reborn in baptism represents the downward dialectic, that is God's life-giving, actuating response to the prayers, objections, and requests. What do you think? Okay, that is fascinating. When I hear dialectics, I get excited about German idealism, Hegelianism.
Super hype about it.
Although, descending, ascending, Neoplatonism, St. Thomas Aquinas, Exodus Reditus, we got all this stuff. Okay, so this is good about private revelations, right? Faustina is given. Jesus tells the interpretation of what this thing is. So you might think, well, actually, maybe that's enough, but it's good to think to unpack the mystery of that. Now, this interpretation that you're proposing here, at least this kind of reflection meditation you have, it's fine. That it is you're relating to the upward like questions. So it's our questions to God, and then his responses, questions, the piercing responses. I think it's true in this sense, that the red ray represents the blood, which is something we cause, the pain, right? It's something we've caused in him. His passion is the thing we caused. and this is the grace from it. And the white represents the baptism, which is not something we cause. That's something we receive, you could say. Now we receive the grace from the passion, but we're actually active in the passion, in a sense, by giving him our sins, really. Whereas in baptism, it's him really doing all the work, the grace of the Holy Spirit coming, descending, to living us. So in that you have this dynamic between us to him and him to us, I think there is something like that distinction between these two things. But of course, in both cases, they're rays descending from Jesus in the image. And he's very clear that he's pouring out graces in the twofold sense. One is through his passion. We can think of this in terms of confession, as we talked about. So the kind of and the other one, the white ray is or pale ray, is in baptism, these graces. So these are all given by him. So would I think of it as like a dialectical experience of Q&A with Jesus in this way? I probably wouldn't think of that way, but I think there is something about there's a distinction between the rays, and there is a distinction in how we interact with baptism and how we interact with the passion. That's, even though they're of course related, because they're both from the pierced heart of Christ, and because the graces of baptism, of course, are not separate from the graces of the passion that flow through them. So that's my kind of just off the cuff thoughts on that. Father Joseph Anthony, what do you have to say about the Divine Mercy image and rays?
I love Divine Mercy. I love the image, but you are the Faustina whisperer. You're the Faustina expert, so I'm going to leave it to you on that one.
I try to be. Well, she's just.
Wait,
she's
here she comes. Here she comes. Are you pulling it out of your pocket?
Say, yeah. Hold on a minute. Oh, that's Crucius. That's my German guy.
Okay.
There she is.
Yeah, there she is. We love her.
Yeah, and look, there's another one there. I've got plenty of these. Oh, and I have I was given so there was a. They're out of questions. Great. So we're a little bit early, but I was at my first religious profession of Faustina's sister of Our Lady of Mercy. Made first simple vows.
Who is that?
It was sister. I shouldn't say it. Maybe Sister Grace. We'll say it that way. They wouldn't know her last name. And she was received the veil. I'd never been to one before. To a religious so cool. Profession of a nun, of a sister, I should say. It's beautiful. It was really beautiful. And the Mother General was there from Poland. Mother Miriam, and received the vows and all this sort of thing. And then she gave me this is a rosary. It's a chaplet, I suppose. That has a little third-class relic of Saint Faustina on the back there too.
Just add it to your collection, man. How many third-class relics of Saint Faustina do you have?
A lot. I've got a second-class relic too, though.
No way.
Yeah, I do have a second-class relic.
What was it, like a pen that she used or something?
No, it's a piece of her habit.
Piece of her habit?
Yeah, it's in this little. It's in this little. It's kind of.
Oh, focus! Wait for the focus.
No, it's not gonna do it because I'm here.
Gonna work.
That's okay. It's too close. Yeah, it's a little. It's down the bottom of his. It's down the bottom of his feet. This little piece of her habit.
That's fun. That's fun. Yeah.
It's really fantastic. Okay, well that's. I guess it's the.
Run the microphone around too.
I know. I'm just getting excited. I mean, I'm submitting I got approved for the dissertation thing, so now I'm just like pulling all night, staying up, trying to finish stuff and all that.
Love it.
Stuff. But
pray for Father Bonaventure Passionventure in there for his.
It's gonna be a weird Lent this time, and it's been weird Lent. It's gonna be a weird one this time because I'll be defending right after Easter. But here we go. So thanks again
all
to
our listeners. Pray for him.
Our supporters. If you'd like to tithe or give any donation to our work, check us out at patreon.com/Godsplaining. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Isn't that a Chinese company? I don't know. I don't understand.
I'm not going,
like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review. Visit godsplaining.org. That's our website. It's very beautiful. It has the color scheme in here is fantastic. It's like the back of Father Joseph Anthony's room there. To shop our merchandise and get dates and information for upcoming Godsplaining events. And as Ingrid and the Spinellis talked about, we've got one coming up in June. We're going to do the Cardinal Virtues by Joseph Pieper. It's a fantastic book. German Thomist. He's really brilliant. And it'll be a great opportunity, a great time. So please sign up for that. We'd love to have you for that retreat. And any other upcoming events, there's other retreats coming up, this sort of thing. But in the meantime, have a wonderful final Passiontide. Just prepare for the Holy Week. Know that we'll be praying for you. And please pray for us. And we'll catch you next time on Godsplaining.